Welcome to the Church Resource, where we talk about the best resources for pastors, leaders, and lay people. I'm your host, Jeff Oliver. Today I'm looking at what is called a classic in Christian literature. It is really foundational for me. It is, I think, sometimes unfortunately packaged in this gift edition, they call it, and it lends itself to being given at things like graduations and that kind of thing, and birthdays for people you don't know what else you should buy them, but it is, so I think that cheapens it a little bit. This is called Why I Am a Christian by Stott. It is one that ought to be read. It is one that really, I think, you need to have this. You need to have the full understanding of what this book explains, what it talks about, and it's, I think, just essential for you to understand the claims that Stott makes in this book. It is similar, by the way, to other books, other apologetic books that are known better, that would cover, the kind of the basic why someone should go to Christianity, why we should embrace Christianity, and some of the reasons behind that. And so, evidence that demands a verdict is one that comes to mind. Others that, like the works of C.S. Lewis, who he quotes quite a bit here in Stott does in this book. But it's just a book that I think is, again, foundational for what you are going to be talking about. And really, if we're not talking about these things, we ought to be. So what he starts out with is, well, there is a famous speech given by Bertrand Russell, who was an atheist, who was an existentialist, who believed that there was really that the Christian religion was not of any value at all. And so he gave a famous speech called Why I Am Not a Christian. And so Stott talks about that essay, that talk that was given by Russell, and he says, now look, this is not trying to be refuting that talk point by point, but I do think that we need to make some counterclaim to that. He wrote it many years later, after Russell made his address, but it is still one that I think helps to counter arguments like that, whatever Russell was saying in that in his talk on why I am not a Christian, he called it. So what Stott does is he sets out all the reasons. It really reads as a series of essays. It is at the same time very philosophical, theological, full of scripture in there, but it is also very accessible. That's my goal in looking at theology, is that it ought to be accessible. It ought to be something that's if the theologian, if the author is doing what he or she ought to be doing in presenting this material to you, then it ought to be something that you can take in, and it ought to be explained in such a way, given illustrations and given just simple, practical language in a way that you can understand that. And I think that Stott does that so well. He, unfortunately, we have lost him. He's not around anymore years ago, but his work still lives on, and I think in just such a gentle spirit, in a way that he approaches this particular topic. Now, he talks about, again, there are several reasons. There are, I believe, 7 chapters as to why he is or was a Christian. And now he is a Christian in the fullest sense, of course, as he's with Jesus. But he talks about the hound of heaven, that there is one in God, in the triune God, who approaches us, who pursues us, as he was referred to as the hound of heaven, who chases after us to bring us to a point of salvation. And Stott talks about that thoroughly, talks about that, I think, does a very good job of doing that. He then proceeds through the claims of Jesus. And this is where he uses a lot of C.S. Lewis work and kind of the way of thinking about it. So Jesus made certain claims, and if he was not honest with that, if his claims were not true, then he was either a liar or a lunatic, or if you have to determine and come down to the idea that, yes, he was genuine in that, and that his claims are valid and are true, then he must be Lord. And that's the place where Stott ends on that argument. Also talks about the cross of Christ. The paradox of our humanness is another chapter in here. Also, the key to freedom. This one's interesting, that he says, of all the other world systems, of all the other faiths that you could follow, that the core desire that people search for in life is really freedom to act, and freedom to know that what they do is good, and that they're freed to be rational and moral people, and freed just in feeling a freedom in life, a peace in their life. And really, he makes a strong argument here that Jesus is the only way to do that. Of course, he comes from a perspective of a Christian, so he's obviously fully convinced here. But we see this argument here. I think that's one of the best chapters of the book, is that Jesus provides that key to our freedom. And so Stott, I think, addresses that very issue very well. The last chapter here, the last claim as to why he was a Christian, is that we are issued in the Bible the title of the chapter, "The Greatest of All Invitations." And then he gives some examples of that. He gives a great reason that we believe that what we see in Scripture is the greatest of any invitation to join in a faith system that will, again, free us, that will redeem us, that will provide peace, comfort in those times. And I just think that this is so well written and necessary for you to understand the claims here, because we are still, he was writing it, and I noticed his language in there. He talks about this postmodern culture that we're in. Of course, now we're talking about a post-Christian culture, and these ideas, these that would be counterclaims to what he addresses in the book here, are still alive and well, and still talked about. And you'll see them come up from time to time in different articles and writings and talks that people have, and some of the ways that they want to refute Christianity. But these arguments that Stott makes in this book are still solid, they're still clear, and very well done. Why I Am a Christian by John Stott. And obviously you can tell I highly recommend this. It's one book from my shelves that's been helpful to me in my ministry. I hope it gives you some direction as you prayerfully consider which resources will best help you and the people you minister to. Well, thanks for listening to the Church Resource, and please make sure that you give us a review. And if you have any suggestions of resources that you would like us to look at, email us at thechurchresource@gmail.com. That's thechurchresource@gmail.com.